It was the early hours of May 1st, 2010. A soft fog rolled over the private, coastal community of Oak Beach on Long Island. Nestled behind gated entrances and winding roads, the neighborhood was asleep, quiet, still. But that stillness was shattered just after 4:30 a.m. A young woman, barefoot, disoriented, and clearly terrified, was seen darting from house to house. She was banging on doors, screaming, pleading for help. Her name was Shannon Gilbert. She was 24 years old, and within just a few hours she would disappear into the marshlands that hugged the neighborhood's edges, never to be seen alive again. This wasn't just another missing persons case. It was the spark that would ignite one of the most chilling serial murder investigations in American history. What started as a search for a single woman soon unraveled into a nightmarish truth buried beneath the sands of Long Island's South Shore, a hidden graveyard, a mystery killer, and a community haunted by the question, how long had a serial killer been living among them? Let's rewind. Shannon Gilbert had come to Oak Beach that night for work. She was an escort, and she traveled from Jersey City with her driver, Michael Pock, to meet a client named Joseph Brewer. The meeting was arranged through Craigslist. The client lived in Oak Beach. According to Brewer, the date started normally, but within an hour, Shannon became paranoid, agitated. She kept saying someone was out to get her. Michael Pock waited outside in the car, but by the time he came to collect her, Shannon was in full panic mode. She locked herself inside Brewer's house. Then she bolted. Pock tried to stop her. Brewer tried to calm her down. But Shannon ran into the dark, away from the house, barefoot and confused. What happened next is chilling. At 4:51 a.m., Shannon called 911. The call would last 23 minutes. She whispered. She cried. She begged for help. "They're trying to kill me," she said. But she never gave her exact location. The dispatcher tried to trace the call. They couldn't. Meanwhile, residents were waking up to the sound of her screams. Shannon reportedly banged on the door of one neighbor, a man named Gus Coletti, who saw her and tried to help, but she ran again before he could call police. Another neighbor reported seeing her hiding under a boat. Then, silence. Shannon vanished. Police showed up hours later, but their response was strangely casual. They told her family that she likely ran off or was on drugs. To them, this wasn't a crime. It was just another escort acting irrationally. They didn't search the marsh. They didn't search the neighborhood thoroughly, and they didn't treat the 911 call with the urgency it demanded. For 6 months, the case stalled. Shannon's family, particularly her mother, Mary Gilbert, refused to accept the police narrative. Mary believed her daughter was in danger. She believed something sinister had happened. But no one listened. Then on December 11th, 2010, everything changed. A Suffolk County police officer, conducting a routine canine training exercise with his cadaver dog along Ocean Parkway, made a horrifying discovery. Roughly a quarter mile from Gilgo Beach, the dog alerted. The officer began to dig. What he uncovered was the skeletal remains of a young woman wrapped tightly in burlap. She was not Shannon Gilbert. But the next day, a second set of remains was found. Then a third. Then a fourth. All wrapped in burlap. All young women. All escorts. All dumped along the same desolate stretch of highway. 4 women, 4 graves, 1 dumping ground. And none of them were Shannon. Investigators quickly linked the women to missing persons reports from 2007 to 2010. All had worked as escorts advertising on Craigslist. All had vanished under similar circumstances. These 4 victims became known as the Gilgo 4. Maureen Brainerd Barnes, last seen in 2007. Melissa Barthélemy disappeared in 2009. Megan Waterman went missing in 2010. Amber Lynn Costello vanished also in 2010. The case, now national news, erupted into chaos. For years, law enforcement had overlooked these disappearances. Now, faced with 4 bodies lined up like warnings on the sand, they couldn't ignore it. The Suffolk County Police admitted it. There was a serial killer on Long Island. Media flooded the area. Locals were horrified. Parents kept their children indoors, and online forums began buzzing with speculation. Who could commit such a crime and get away with it for years? How many more victims were out there? Was this connected to Shannon Gilbert? The public was finally asking the questions Shannon's mother had been asking for months. But the deeper police dug, the darker it got. Investigators expanded their search beyond Gilgo Beach. Over the coming months, more remains would be found, some dismembered, some buried in separate counties, some dating back more than a decade. And still, no trace of Shannon Gilbert. At least, not yet. This was no longer a search for a missing woman. It was a manhunt for a phantom, a methodical killer, calculating enough to pick high-risk victims, hide in plain sight, and outsmart the system for years. But who was he? How had he avoided detection in a world of cell towers, surveillance, and search engines? The next sections of this story will reveal the full scope of what was uncovered, from 11 victims to anonymous phone calls, from a failed police force to a chilling suspect. But remember this: if Shannon Gilbert had never vanished, if her mother hadn't fought, if that cadaver dog hadn't been walked along Ocean Parkway that day, the Long Island serial killer might never have been discovered. And he still might not be. What started as a search for a single woman had now turned into a grotesque revelation. 4 dead bodies, all women, all buried in burlap, all carefully placed along a remote strip of brush near Gilgo Beach. But this was only the beginning. The deeper they searched, the more they unearthed. Long Island wasn't just hiding a serial killer. It was hiding a cemetery. The 4 women found in December 2010, Maureen Brainerd Barnes, Melissa Barthelemy, Megan Waterman, and Amber Lynn Costello, shared more than just the way they died. They were each young, petite women in their 20s, with similar hair colors and backgrounds. All of them worked as escorts, advertising their services on Craigslist. All of them had vanished without a trace after being contacted by clients they thought were safe. They were last seen in New York City or nearby areas, and then they simply disappeared. None of their cases had received significant media attention at the time. They were labeled high-risk victims, a term that, unfortunately, often meant less urgent in law enforcement circles. But now, in death, they had become the faces of a nightmare. The discovery sparked national headlines. Serial killer on Long Island? Bodies line Gilgo Beach. Police on alert. And while Suffolk County Police scrambled to respond, the public grew increasingly fearful. But the killer wasn't finished. He never had been. In March and April of 2011, just months after the Gilgo 4 were discovered, investigators expanded their search beyond the initial crime scene. Using cadaver dogs, ground-penetrating radar, and aerial surveillance, they combed the thick brush and tall reeds along Ocean Parkway. What they found would shake even the most seasoned detectives. Another 6 sets of remains, scattered across different locations: Gilgo Beach, Jones Beach Island, Tobay Beach, and Nassau County. These remains told a different kind of story. They weren't like the Gilgo 4. They were older cases, cold cases, some from as far back as the late 1990s. Some of them were only partial remains. Others were clearly dismembered, with body parts scattered across counties. A few victims were linked together through DNA testing, body parts of the same woman found years apart in different towns. This wasn't just a cluster of killings. It was an entire pattern. Among the new victims, Jessica Taylor. Found in 2003 in Manorville, her torso was discovered in a wooded area. But in 2011, her skull, hands, and forearm were found near Gilgo Beach, a haunting sign that the killer was revisiting old victims and old dump sites, or had always used these areas as his burial grounds. Valerie Mack, a similar story. Her partial remains were found in Manorville in 2000, but her head, arms, and right leg were discovered on Ocean Parkway in 2011. 2 decades, 2 dump sites, 1 method, baby doe. In one of the most disturbing discoveries, the remains of a toddler, no older than 2 years old, were found wrapped in a blanket. She had been killed and discarded not far from another victim. Unidentified Asian male, estimated to be between 17 and 23 years old, found wearing women's clothing. His death was clearly homicide, and his connection to the other victims remains a complete mystery. Jane Doe #3 and #7, unidentified adult women, dismembered, remains found in multiple areas, never named, never claimed. As the body count rose to 11, the case no longer looked like the work of one man acting on impulse. This was methodical. This was a serial killer, possibly more than one, who targeted, lured, killed, and disposed of his victims with terrifying precision over a span of more than 15 years. And yet, still missing from the list was Shannon Gilbert. The woman whose disappearance started the entire investigation was nowhere among the recovered remains. But she had to be connected, right? That was the question haunting her family and dividing investigators. Suffolk County Police insisted that Shannon's case was separate. They said she likely drowned in the marsh after a drug-induced panic. But her mother, Maury Gilbert, refused to believe it. She said Shannon was killed, and whoever killed her was also responsible for the bodies on the beach. That debate would boil for months, and all the while the killer or killers seemed to vanish back into the shadows. Public pressure mounted. The media flooded Oak Beach. National outlets like CNN, NBC, and 48 Hours ran specials on the Gilgo Beach murders. True crime communities dissected every lead. People speculated wildly. Was it a local resident? A police officer? Someone with military or forensic knowledge? Could it be multiple killers using the same dump site? And then came another twist. Phone records revealed that at least one of the victim's cell phones, Melissa Barthelemy's, had been used after her death. But not to hide evidence. No. The killer had used her phone to call her younger sister. Not once, but multiple times. He taunted her, described intimate details, mocked her family. And the calls were traced, not to a random location, but to Times Square. That meant the killer was bold enough to walk into Manhattan, one of the most heavily surveilled places in the world, and make threatening calls without being caught. It was chilling and infuriating. Police formed a task force. The FBI got involved, but even with thousands of tips and suspects, no one could be definitively linked to the crimes. It was as if the killer had vanished, or never existed at all. By the end of 2011, the case had hit a wall. 11 victims, no suspects, no arrests. Public trust in the Suffolk County Police Department began to collapse. Families accused investigators of mishandling the case or worse, covering something up. Even journalists began asking hard questions. Why was the 911 call from Shannon Gilbert never released? Why was the department so insistent she wasn't a murder victim? And why did it take 6 months to find the first body when she had disappeared just feet away from the burial ground? These weren't just procedural errors. They were failures. And they were stalling one of the most important serial murder investigations in American history. But in the shadows, the killer or killers waited. Unseen, untouched, unknown. To this day, not all the victims found along Ocean Parkway have been identified. Their families may not even know they're gone. Their stories remain silent, trapped in the sands of Gilgo Beach. And if we've learned anything so far, it's that Long Island's coast holds more than secrets. It holds clues. In Section 3, we follow the trail left behind. Burner phones, digital footprints, chilling calls, and a suspect that seemed almost invisible. The Long Island serial killer wasn't just hiding in plain sight, he was watching, listening, and waiting. A phone rings. It's late at night and the call goes straight to voicemail. On the other end, a man speaks. He's calm, collected. He's using a dead woman's phone to taunt her family. Do you miss me? She's gone. You'll never find her. For one family, it was the moment their hope turned to horror. And for investigators, it was the moment they realized the Long Island serial killer was watching them all along. Following the grisly discovery of the Gilgo 4 and the additional remains in 2011, detectives faced a monster with no face, no name, and seemingly no digital footprint. But in the shadows, he left clues. Whispers, traces, missteps, a trail that, if followed precisely, could unlock the mind of a killer who had been operating in plain sight for over a decade. The first piece of the puzzle? Burner phones. All four of the known Gilgo Beach victims, Maureen Brainerd Barnes, Melissa Barthelemy, Megan Waterman, and Amber Lynn Costello, had used Craigslist or Backpage to advertise escort services, and all four had been contacted by clients using untraceable, prepaid phones. The phones were activated anonymously. Each was used briefly to contact the victim and then either powered down or destroyed. For a while, it seemed the killer had covered his tracks. But with Melissa Barthelemy's case, the killer made a crucial mistake. After Melissa vanished in 2009, her phone didn't immediately go dark. Instead, it stayed active for several days, not to make calls to clients, but to make taunting calls to Melissa's teenage sister, Amanda. The voice on the other end was cold, calculated, male. He mocked Amanda, told her that Melissa was dead, recounted intimate details that hadn't been made public. He called her 7 times over 3 days. Each call was short, never lasting longer than a minute. He was careful. But the calls were traced, not to a home or office, but to Times Square, Manhattan, to Madison Square Garden, to bustling public areas with thousands of people. He was hiding in the open, surrounded by noise, by lights, by cameras. And yet, no one saw him. He never stayed long. He never used the same spot twice. He made sure to keep moving, turning off the phone seconds after each call. It was masterfully executed. Police realized then this wasn't a man driven by impulse. This was a man who planned every move with precision, a predator. Investigators began digging into the digital forensics of the victims' lives. They uncovered a pattern of communications that pointed to a single user, someone who had created multiple Craigslist accounts, each one linked to a different burner phone. But no names, no addresses. The killer had left just enough to lure the women in and then vanished without a trace. The only thing that tied the victims together was the method and the silence that followed. With the killer's apparent tech savvy, some theorized that he may have been law enforcement or had at least studied their tactics. Former Suffolk County Police Commissioner Richard Dormer went on record in 2011, saying the killer may have a working knowledge of police procedures and forensic awareness. It made sense. The killer had avoided using traceable technology, dumped bodies in areas where decomposition would delay time of death estimates, used burlap sacks, reducing scent detection from cadaver dogs, selected high-risk victims, escorts whose disappearances weren't immediately prioritized. Everything pointed to a deliberate strategy, but the real question remained, who was he? And even more chilling, was he still killing? In 2012, the case took another strange turn. Former Suffolk County Police Chief James Burke, who had been leading the investigation, was accused of obstructing the FBI from fully joining the case. Why? Some said it was jurisdictional pride. Others believed it was something darker. Then in 2015, Burke was arrested, but not for mishandling the Gilgo case. He was convicted for assaulting a man in custody and orchestrating a cover-up. That man had allegedly stolen sex toys, porn, and other personal items from Burke's car. The scandal tarnished the department's credibility, and it fed a growing theory. Was someone inside the department protecting the killer? Or worse, was someone inside the department the killer? Meanwhile, the families of the victims, especially Mari Gilbert, Shannon's mother, kept pushing. They protested, held vigils, demanded accountability. They insisted Shannon's death was connected. But Suffolk police maintained their stance. Shannon Gilbert had not been murdered. They cited the results of an autopsy performed in 2011, which claimed she drowned accidentally in the marsh. But the evidence didn't sit right. Her body wasn't found until December 2011, over a year after she vanished. When recovered, her clothing was missing. Her bones were scattered, consistent with post-mortem movement, but not necessarily drowning. A second independent autopsy, conducted by a private pathologist, suggested Homicidal strangulation couldn't be ruled out. Still, police insisted on their theory: no foul play. To this day, Shannon Gilbert's cause of death remains undetermined. But Mari never accepted that. She knew her daughter didn't just wander into the marsh and drown. She believed her death was part of the same pattern, part of the killer's story. And tragically, in 2016, Marie herself would become a victim, murdered by her other daughter, Sarah, who was later diagnosed with schizophrenia. The woman who fought hardest to uncover the truth about Gilgo Beach would never see justice delivered. By the late 2010s, the investigation had gone cold. There were no arrests, no new evidence, no new leads. But the internet hadn't forgotten. Amateur sleuths, Reddit users, and citizen investigators kept digging. They dissected crime scene photos, reviewed police timelines, cross-referenced cell phone tower pings. Some created detailed maps of all the dump sites. Others built psychological profiles of the killer. What emerged was a terrifying possibility. The Long Island serial killer wasn't gone. He was just waiting. Waiting for things to quiet down. Waiting for the spotlight to fade. Waiting to kill again. In 2020, a new ray of hope emerged. A new police commissioner, Rodney Harrison, took over the Suffolk County Police Department. One of his first actions was to form a new Gilgo Beach task force. He promised transparency. He welcomed federal agencies back in. He opened case files that had long been hidden. And quietly in the background, new technology was being used. Genetic genealogy, advanced cell tower triangulation, behavioral analysis. What law enforcement couldn't do in 2011, they could now. The killer had left digital footprints. They were faint, but they were there. And finally, after more than a decade, the trail was heating up. For years, the case had gone cold. The victims were buried, the trail had faded, and the killer, whoever he was, had vanished into the quiet suburbs of Long Island. But evil doesn't sleep forever, and neither did the task force. In early 2022, a newly energized investigation began quietly, under the leadership of Suffolk County Police Commissioner Rodney Harrison, a former NYPD chief. Unlike his predecessors, Harrison made one thing clear: this case will be solved. He restructured the Gilgo Beach Task Force, brought in federal partners, forensic analysts, digital trace experts, and genetic genealogy specialists. They revisited every inch of the case file, thousands of pages, hundreds of tips, and a string of encrypted, prepaid phone records long thought to be dead ends. And slowly, methodically, a pattern began to emerge. A pattern that led to a name that, for 13 years, had hidden in plain sight: Rex Heuermann. To his neighbors in Massapequa Park, Rex Heuermann was a quiet, if not reclusive, professional. A 59-year-old architect, married with 2 children. He worked in Midtown Manhattan, commuting daily into the city. His firm, RH Consultants Associates, specialized in high-end building design. He had no criminal record, no known connection to any of the victims. And yet beneath the surface, there were signs, small ones, and the task force found them all. The breakthrough began with cell phone data specifically, the burner phones used to contact the Gilgo 4, or Mount. Investigators traced pings from those phones. When cross-referenced with cell tower logs, the phones had frequently been in Massapequa Park and Midtown Manhattan, the same 2 areas where Rex Heuermann lived and worked. From there, they obtained surveillance footage, cross-checked vehicle registrations, and followed digital behavior. What they found was chilling. In the months leading up to the murders, Rex had searched for escort services late at night. He used multiple fake email accounts to set up meetings. He also made disturbing internet searches. Why haven't they caught the Long Island serial killer? Best places to dump a body. How to dismember a body. Girl begging for life. But it wasn't enough to arrest him. They needed physical evidence. And then, fate handed them a slice of DNA. In early 2023, as part of a quiet surveillance operation, the task force followed Rex from his Manhattan office to a local pizza shop. He finished his slice, wiped his mouth, and tossed the crust into a trash can. Detectives moved in moments later. The crust was collected, sealed, sent to the lab. And when the DNA results came back, they matched a crucial piece of evidence found on one of the Gilgo 4, a hair left on the burlap used to wrap a victim. It wasn't a perfect match, but it was close enough to link to Rex Heuermann's family line, specifically him. On July 13, 2023, Rex Heuermann was arrested outside his office on Fifth Avenue. He was charged with the murders of Melissa Barthelemy, Megan Waterman, and Amberlynn Costello. He was also named the prime suspect in the murder of Maureen Brainerd Barnes, though that charge was still pending at the time. The public reaction was instant and intense. News vans lined the street outside his quiet suburban home. Helicopters flew overhead. Neighbors stared in disbelief as officers combed the house with shovels, dogs, and radar equipment. Inside the home, they found a disturbing collection. Over 200 firearms, some illegally possessed. A hidden room secured behind a heavy, locked steel door. Personal files, maps, burner phones, and perhaps most chilling, taunting online searches, including the victims' names, their family members, and crime scene photos, all stored within the same house where his family lived. A wife, a daughter, a son. They claimed they had no idea. And maybe they didn't. The press labeled Heuermann as a monster with a mask, a man who lived a double life, white-collar professional by day, predator by night. And yet, questions lingered. Why only charge him with 3 murders when at least 11 victims had been found? Why not Shannon Gilbert? Why not the dismembered bodies scattered between counties? The police had an answer. They believed Heuermann was responsible for the Gilgo 4. But as for the others, that was still under investigation. It opened the door to a terrifying possibility. Was there more than one killer? Or had Heuermann evolved over time, changing his methods, growing bolder, and experimenting with disposal techniques? Even more disturbing, did he stop killing in 2010? Or was he still active, simply changing locations? The timeline was alarming. Heuermann had been operating from his Massapequa Park home less than 20 minutes from Gilgo Beach the entire time. His daily commute into Manhattan aligned with the burner phone calls made from Times Square to Melissa Barthelemy's sister. He lived in the same area the cell phone towers had pinged repeatedly. And yet, for over a decade, no one had questioned him. He had passed completely under the radar. In the days following his arrest, investigators revealed that they were now examining cold cases across the country, looking for any similar patterns. And online sleuths began pulling up missing persons from other states, asking whether this was really the full story. As of now, Rex Heuermann has pleaded not guilty. He remains in custody, awaiting trial. And while prosecutors prepare their case, families of the victims still wonder, what else is buried? How many more were there? And will we ever truly know? One thing is certain. The arrest of Rex Heuermann marked a turning point not just in the investigation, but in the public's perception of the case. For years, the Long Island serial killer had been seen as a phantom, a faceless menace haunting the coast. Now he had a face, a name. But the mystery? It wasn't over. Far from it. The man is behind bars. The headlines say justice has finally arrived. But in Long Island, peace remains elusive. Because the story doesn't end with one arrest. Not when there are still victims without names, families without answers, and questions that the justice system hasn't or won't fully confront. This isn't a closed case. This is a crime scene that still breathes. And what remains buried might be far more disturbing than anything that's been uncovered. After Rex Heuermann's arrest in July 2023, the nation exhaled. For years, the Long Island serial killer had haunted not just a coastline, but the American consciousness, a phantom figure responsible for the deaths of at least 11 people, maybe more. Now he had a face, a home, a past. But the deeper you look, the more you realize the arrest didn't answer everything. It just opened new doors to darkness. Let's start with the known victims. The Gilgo 4, Maureen Brainerd Barnes, Melissa Barthelemy, Megan Waterman, Amber Lynn Costello. Rex Heuermann has been charged in 3 of these murders. He's the prime suspect in the 4th. But what about the others? The remaining victims. Jessica Taylor, partial remains found in 2 separate locations. Valerie Mack dismembered and scattered across counties. Peaches, a woman identified only by a heart-shaped tattoo. Her child, baby Doe, was found nearby. Asian male Doe, estimated to be in his late teens or early 20s, found dressed in women's clothing. Jane Doe #3 and #7 still unidentified. Shannon Gilbert, the woman whose disappearance started it all. Rex Heuermann has not been charged in any of their deaths. And as of now, no one has. Law enforcement claims those cases are still under investigation, but for many, especially the victims' families, that explanation rings hollow. How do you explain the consistent dumping ground, the use of burlap, the chronological proximity of the murders, the geographic overlap? Was there more than one killer? Had others taken advantage of the same location? Or was the truth far more sinister that Heuermann, or someone like him, had simply changed his methods over time? It's a question that may never be fully answered. Then there's the issue of Shannon Gilbert. The woman who unknowingly exposed the burial site remains an anomaly in the official narrative. Police long insisted she drowned after running into the marsh in a panic. Her autopsy was inconclusive. Her cause of death is still officially listed as undetermined. But her mother, Mary Gilbert, never accepted that. Mari fought tooth and nail for Shannon's case to be treated as a homicide. She hired an independent pathologist who found signs of possible manual strangulation. She organized protests, confronted officials, and demanded the truth. Tragically, in 2016, Mary was murdered by her daughter Sarah in a psychotic episode, silencing one of the loudest voices seeking justice in the case. Today, with Heuermann in custody, the police still maintain that Shannon's death was not a murder. But for many, the public, investigators, and true crime analysts alike, the idea that her death was simply an accident doesn't sit right. Not when it happened feet from where the bodies were buried. Public suspicion runs deep. Some believe that Heuermann isn't the only killer and may not even be the main one. Others question the police department itself. The former Suffolk County Police Chief James Burke, who led the case early on, was later convicted on federal charges. He had blocked the FBI from assisting in the Lisk investigation and had a long history of abuse of power and corruption. Why would he resist federal help? Was he hiding incompetence or something more? To this day, there are conspiracy theories suggesting law enforcement cover-ups, sex trafficking ties, and dark web connections that were never fully pursued. None of it has been proven, but none of it has been definitively disproven either. Meanwhile, for families of the victims, life remains in a painful limbo. For every headline that celebrates progress, there are mothers, fathers, siblings, and children wondering, when will their loved one's killer be named? When will they get the truth? When will the world stop treating their stories like footnotes? The media often focuses on the arrest, the profile, the mystery man finally unmasked. But the women? They fade into the background. Let's remember them. They were daughters, sisters, mothers, people with dreams, struggles, and real lives. Many were trying to survive using the only resources they had to earn a living. Society failed them long before the killer did. Their lives mattered. Their names should never be forgotten. And as for the public, there's a collective unease that hasn't gone away. If a man like Rex Heuermann could live quietly among families for 2 decades working in Manhattan, raising children, hosting barbecues, and still be capable of such horror, what does that say about the world we live in? What does that say about how we define evil? How we miss it, overlook it, let it grow? The truth is, monsters don't always wear masks. Sometimes they wear suits. Sometimes they live right next door. Today, the Gilgo Beach Task Force continues its work. They are using genetic genealogy, digital forensics, and cold case analysis to review old evidence with fresh eyes. They are quietly digging, listening, comparing. And they are still asking for the public's help because someone out there may hold a piece of the puzzle. A tip, a name, a memory. Something small that unlocks something big. Because until every victim is named, until every killer is caught, until every family knows what happened, this case is not closed. And maybe it never will be. Pause. So now we ask, who else knew? Who else helped? And who else is still walking free? Because when justice comes too late or only partially, it isn't justice. It's a reminder, a warning, that the darkest secrets are often the ones we bury in plain sight.